Today is the greatest day I've ever known. Can't wait for tomorrow. Tomorrow might never come. Today on this CB500F, we're going to replace the front axle, the front wheel bearings, and the bearing spacer. So that's what's coming up today on Hoopty Doodle. Hi, kitty. Oh, you're a good kitty. Okay. Get up. Get up. Dude. Alright, so the bike is sort of jammed in here in the garage, and I'm trying to make space and make use of what I've got to get this thing on the road. And so today we're going to work on the front axle. We're going to put a new front axle on this bike, and luckily it's quite affordable to do that, even with brand new OEM parts. Let me show you what I'm talking about. In order to do that, I'm going to use this engine hoist. I'm going to get in here, and I've got a lifting strap here. I'm going to wrap this around the front part of the frame here, and then we'll put it on the hook and lift this thing up. Alright, and then in order to get this axle off, you have to remove the front brake, and over here on this side there is a hex nut, or an Allen head nut. And I have got this nice set of Allen head sockets here with nice mega size ones in here like this, which is a 19mm Allen head. So I should have what I need in here to get this on. Actually, I know I have what I need in here. That one's a 17mm to get this axle off. So the brake caliper has two 12mm bolts there holding it on. I'm just going to take those off, and this caliper should slide off to the side, and we can hang this up here and then take the wheel off. I just set it up here on top of the radiator. That should keep it nice and safe, where we're not putting any pressure or stress on this brake line. Alright, now the interesting part is getting the wheel off, because when you start to undo this axle, you can actually see the forks move up and down independent of each other, where one moves up and the other moves down, and that to me indicates that our axle is bent. Alright, you have to loosen up this nut here, which I believe is also another 13mm. I could be wrong on that though. A little pinch bolt for the axle. But watch the wheel moving. See that? It's wobbling back and forth. Alright, it's out. Pull this guy out. Wheel out. Get my little spacer out of here. That back on the wheel for right now. Alright, so these are good. All of our work now is on this axle, which it's hard to tell if it's bent or not. I can roll it on the floor. Like even rolling this on the ground, it's hard to tell. Well, it's hard to tell. If I had a lathe, I could strap this in. We might be able to see how this was bent. Alright, so we got our box of new parts here. So here's our new axle. This is the part number on this guy. I also got some dust seals for the axle, for the wheel. Some new bearings for the wheel bearings. And there is a bushing inside the wheel. And we're basically going to rebuild the front wheel for a total of $55. So not bad at all. Let's get this wheel. Alright, here's our wheel. Let's get to work on this guy, see what we can do. Alright, so first I'm going to remove these little spacers on the outside. I elected not to get new ones of these. I'm hoping that's the right move. These are the spacers on the side. Get those off of there. All right, so you can see inside there that the little bearing in there, that should be one of these guys here that we're seeing right there, and then inside those is the little bushing, which is this guy right here. So first we got to get off this dust cap, which are these guys. So we got to remove that from the actual wheel. All right, so I've got an oil seal remover tool. That's what this guy here is, with these little hooks on the end. That's specifically designed to do exactly this work right here. So I should, in theory, be able to get in here with this little hook this seal, and then sort of yank this thing out of here. Just like that. All right, let's see if we can do it on the other side as well. All right, those are both out. Now we want to get in here, get this bearing out of there. And to do that, I've gotten some special tools here. I've got this guy here. This is something I ordered off of Amazon for $50. It is a bearing removal tool for motorcycles. It's sort of a universal kit. Different sizes here for different bearings. This is a good investment if I'm going to be owning a motorcycle or motorcycles and working on them myself, because inevitably you're going to need this, and it's about every 30 or 40,000 miles basically with a motorcycle you need to replace these wheel bearings. Or as a loaner, this is going to be used to drive the new bearings into the bike, and I'm hoping this will fit. It kind of fits the bearing. I may end up using something else, and I'll have links to all the tools I'm using as well as the parts I'm using in the description of this video. All right, so to remove the bearing, I'm going to go ahead and place the wheel on some wood here to keep it up off the ground, just like that. And then we've got our bearing kit right here, our bearing removal kit. And this is supposed to, these bearings are 17 millimeter. So there's a 17 millimeter driver right here. Stick that guy in the hub basically, and then we've got the right driver to go with that. There's two different size drivers. I should be able to use this guy. These guys, there's a little slot on the end. This portion here on the end is 17 millimeter diameter, and then the driver itself is like a big screwdriver, flathead screwdriver basically, and this guy slots in there, and as you drive it, it will expand this section here because of the slot in it. This will expand, grab onto the bearing, and then you can push the whole bearing out that way. So go ahead and stick this guy in there. We'll get this driver slotted in. Get my hammer and tap this on here, maybe help seat it a little bit. Then we'll flip it over and try and drive it out. There, it feels like it's grabbed on now, holding in place. Let's see if we can do this. No, it didn't work. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and install this driver. And we're gonna heat it. All right, I'm gonna use a little propane torch here. I'm gonna heat it up real good. Yes, it came out. Came out, look at that. Sweet. Sweet, sweet. All right, so we got the bearing and the little shaft in between, the little centering shaft, or however, the spacer in the middle. So both of those came out. I'm replacing both of these, and basically the concept is that this was in a front end accident. The wheel took a definite impact on the wheel, and it definitely affected the forks on the bike, and it affected the axle itself, which is this guy right here. So this, I think, is the only thing that really was bent, but I mean, it rides right on these bearings, so the bearings, I'm sure, took some force, and even though they may be just fine, I'm going to replace them just to be safe. And you have to replace them anyways every 30,000 miles. It's just, I'm doing some pre-scheduled maintenance Well, we got this bike apart anyway, so really not that much extra work. And go ahead and get this thing done while we got it. How do we get this off now, huh? There we go. All right, we'll do the same thing on the other side. All right, so that guy's out. Now it's time to clean the wheel out a little bit. To do that, I've got some paper towels. Go ahead and clean up the inside. Make sure there's no debris at all in there. Then we'll get out our new bearings. All right, so here is our little axle. This is like a spacer, basically. They call it a front axle collar, distance collar. So I'm gonna bust this guy out. So this looks to the naked eye, the old one looks just fine. So this guy just goes in the hub and spaces out those bearings. That's the whole purpose of that guy. So I'm gonna set that aside. Then we've got our new bearing here. I'm gonna get some grease real quick. All right, so here's our grease. I'm just using some synthetic sort of general purpose grease, although it does say wheel bearing specifically on the canister here. So this stuff, put a little bit of this grease around the bearing to help this go in a little bit easier. I'm talking like super thin coat of this. Super thin, man. I'm gonna go ahead and stick this in here. The instructions on the manual say to have the face side up, and there is no difference at all that I can tell on this bearing in terms of face side. All right, so the bearing driver kit that I got from the auto parts store that I rented, basically, this guy comes with a series of different options for different size bearings. This is the one that most closely matches our application here. It is labeled as a 1.965 inch diameter driver surface there, which is the closest one to our bearing. If you look at the old bearing, I could make this work, but I'm gonna have to center, it doesn't exactly line up perfectly with the bearing. I'm worried that it's a little bit too close to the inside. It's not exactly on the outside of the bearing. I don't want to push out the inside of this bearing and damage it. That is a bad thing. I do happen to have a large socket here. It's a 32 millimeter socket, and this fits the bearing much better. You can see it overlaps the outside ring, the outside race of the bearing a lot better, and that is what you want. So I'm going to use this guy instead to drive it in, and it's basically just lining up with that outside race like that, and then hammering it down in. And you want to use something that contacts the outside race all together to drive it in, because you want to push it straight down in. You don't want to do one side and the other like that. So if you would try to use like just a regular hammer or like some sort of driver or something like this axle, you know, something like that, and do one side at a time, bad idea. Don't do that. Go find something that will actually work for the application. The Honda manual specifically says to do the disc brake side first. Doesn't give an explanation as to why, but that's what it says. So that is what we're going to do. I could heat up the wheel again, but let's try doing it without that. Let's see what happens. So I want to do this as uniformly as possible. So keeping my socket on this outside ring here, that's outside race, and driving it down as evenly as possible. Until it seats all the way to the bottom, which sometimes you can tell by the sound of it. Yeah, hear that ring sound? That's seated all the way. All right, so now flip it over, install our little spacer, the distance collar, it's also called. This guy goes in the wheel like so. All right, so you can see how nicely that is centered in the wheel right now. This is probably why Honda wants you to do it the other side, the disc brake side bearing first. It's because if you can see down in here, this guy will sit just perfectly down in, and it actually, there's a little bit of a ridge down in there that this will sit in. It sort of drops into like that, and then it will sit in there quite perfectly. Now we're gonna do the other bearing. All right, and then we'll grease this one up as well. There's a nice light coat on there. I'll go ahead and stick this guy in here like that. Get our socket, start driving it home. And check it along the way to make sure it's going in straight. You can hear that change in pitch as it bottoms out. And you can see that spacer in between the bearings is still in there nice and straight. Our dust caps to go on there. I used a little bit of grease as well on these. And just do the outsides of these. So we'll just push this in by hand. Just like that. And I'll put a little bit of grease on the inside at this point. Alright, we'll flip into the other side. And again, I'm going to put some grease on the outside of this guy, just a little bit. And then we'll go ahead and install this by hand in here. And I'm just going to push it down with my palm. I want to make sure it's below all the edges of the wheel rim here, which it is. It's seated all the way down fully onto the bearing. Put a little bit of grease on the inside rim here of the dust seal. And that should just help with keeping dust out of the bearing and stuff. That grease itself will act as sort of like a little seal. We've got the little other spacers here that I'm reusing, the old ones. That's the only thing I did not buy new. And then they go in on the sides right here, like that. And the same thing on the other side. So there's those guys, and let's install it on the bike. So we'll go ahead and stick this guy back on the bike. I get my new axle out, and I'm gonna get some of that same grease. Grease up this axle. And it really doesn't need to be much, just this light coating of grease on here. This is probably more than I need. This guy goes on the wheel. Alright, get my wheel in place here. Grab my axle. Slide that guy through, and then it's threaded on this side of the wheel, on this fork down here. There's this threaded side, and so on the other side we've got this same one we used to take it off, which is that 17mm Allen head. Get this aligned on this side and start trying to thread that in real easy. That feels a lot better. The wheel is not wobbling, shifting back and forth as I tighten it down, so I think we fixed our problem. Now I'm just going to tighten this down to the correct torque specs. It should be 40 foot-pounds or 54 Newton meters. That's the torque spec on this guy right here. There we go. Bam! The pinch bolt is 16 foot-pounds or 22 Newton meters. And then we need to put the brake caliper back on the other side. Alright, then reinstalling the brake caliper. Go ahead and take these bolts back off of the caliper. Then we'll slide our brake caliper back onto the rotor, making sure we get the brake pads around the rotor, and slide the rotor up into position and hand thread these bolts back on to the caliper. Make sure they both go on there nice and easy. Tighten them down finger tight here, and these guys get tightened down to 22 foot-pounds or 30 Newton meters. There's one. There's two. Brake caliper's back on. Wheel is back on the bike the way it's supposed to be. Oh, it's a good day. Good day. Well, thanks for watching this video. I'm going to put things away here, and then in our next video, we're going to continue this custom build, and I'm going to start putting things back together on this bike now that we've moved it down to Texas, and hopefully start it up. So see you next time. Thanks for watching, and keep on wrenching, everybody.